Hello. Are you looking to buy a small business and wondering whether you're paying the right price for it? Well, this is the right video for you. Okay, so we had a great question from Jonathan, one of our followers, and he said, how do I know when a business owner is asking too much? I think generally business owners charge too much or ask for too much on their businesses. Let me try and answer this and walk you through my logic for how I solve that question. Before we go any further, I just want to talk about valuation methods. So in the larger world of M&A, there are lots of ways to value a business. In the smaller business acquisition space, 9 times out of 10, a small business is valued on a multiple of cash flow, of earnings. So that means if a business has earnings of $300,000 and a multiple of 3, then the business will transact or sell at $900,000. There are only 2 variables. It's the earnings and then the multiple, what's called a multiple. And that varies based on the size of the business, the riskiness of the business, industry location, all of these things. So lots of factors go into the multiple and then the earnings. Those are the only 2 variables we're solving for. Multiples really confuse people, so we're gonna start there. How do I know what a reasonable multiple is for the industry that I'm looking at? Now, just know, by very nature, these small business transactions are private, which means the data available on them is limited. There are several places out there where you can go to get some information. For example, BizBuySell, which is a popular online platform, collects data on sales through its platform. That is useful. However, it's only some of the picture. These businesses are also quite small often. So if you want to buy something slightly larger, not always the most relevant. There are also third-party sites such as BVR, PitchBook, Business Reference Guide, and others that collect other information about what the market is telling us about what certain businesses are worth. These are all great places to go, but just know that none of these data sets are perfect. They're all missing some information. For example, PitchBook is popular with slightly larger transactions. Because I've bought companies, I am in there as having bought company XYZ. I have people call me sometimes trying to sell me stuff, and they'll say, hey, I've seen you bought company X. And I test them a bit and I try and find out what they know. And actually, they've never known everything about the transaction. So somehow the way they collect this data or collate this data, it just doesn't have all of the information about a transaction in it. You can even Google the transaction you're looking at and get some sort of indication on the type of multiple that might be appropriate. The bottom line is, at this particular point in time, you can buy small businesses from 2 times earnings, and that's smaller companies. You might be buying a job at that point. But really 3 to 4 is quite common, or maybe up to 5. This is the kind of ballpark space that we're mostly playing in. I like to tell people not to stress out too much about multiple. What I care way more about is the second question. So the first question was, what is the market telling me in terms of these data sources and what the multiple is? The second question, which is way more important to me, is what are the financial statements telling me? This is great data because it's specific to the company, and using this, we can find out some really useful information to help us in our purchase. So the financial statements are the profit and loss, the balance sheet, and the cash flow statements. We don't worry too much about cash flow statements right now because a lot of small businesses don't use it, don't even know what it is. On the profit and loss side, let's just do some level setting before we get into it. You could have 2 exactly the same businesses, let's say window cleaners. One does 5% net income, one does 15% net income. And the reason the 15% net income one is able to achieve 3 times as much profit is because they have a piece of software that more efficiently books their window cleaners, so there's less downtime. So obviously this company that does the higher profit is more valuable than the one that does 5. My point for mentioning this is, as you get lower and lower profit in the business, obviously the business gets a lot less valuable. Why is that? It's because there's not enough profit there. Obviously you've got capital expenditure, taxes, but then even after that, then you've got nothing left to pay the debt that you've put on the business in order to purchase it. Because most people, 95 times out of 100 will use debt when buying a company. And so you have to have some profit left over in the P&L in order to service that new debt. Are you overwhelmed in your journey into small business ownership? If so, look no further than my inner circle. The inner circle is the best way to accelerate your journey into small business ownership. We are a community of small business buyers offering the best in education, community, and accountability to change your life. Book a discovery call with me today and let's talk. Link is just below. So my point here, without getting too granular, is you need some level of profitability in the company that you're looking at to then work out how much debt you can put on it. And that will tell you the answer of how much you can pay for it. What you want is you want the profit to be twice what the debt service will be. That gives you a coverage over the debt service, that gives you a safety net. You don't want your profit to equal the debt service, and banks won't lend on this anyway, but even if they did, you wouldn't want that because a tiny change in the performance of the business might bring profits down and you still have this debt payment to make. That is a very stressful situation to be in. You just don't want to be there. And so what I always recommend is you want the profit to be twice what the debt service is. Now, this is where the algebra comes in, and don't panic if you hated algebra at school, don't worry, I'll tell you what to do here. But if you did like algebra at school, this is probably your moment to shine. You know what the profit of the business is. Before you start working out what the debt service is, you need to work out what the approximate profit will be in year one of your ownership. So you take the last year, you add conservatism to it. You've got to figure out what you will need as a salary. You need to know if there's a manager you need to hire, what they'll be taking, maybe a bookkeeper, any changes in office or travel or any other of the line items in the P&L. You've got to make those changes so you have an idea of what your profit will be in the first year. And don't go factoring in a 50% growth in revenue. Like, that's not sensible. If anything, put a 5% reduction in just to be conservative. But then you got your profit and you know you need to solve for your debt service. Now, the debt service is based on 3 variables: your interest rate, the length of the loan, and the price you've paid. You can find out by speaking to a lender what the interest rate is. You can find out by speaking to a lender what the length of the loan is. And so then it just becomes pure algebra. You solve for what you can actually pay for the business to make sure the profit stays twice what the debt service is. If this is sounding really overwhelming, you need to get into Excel and you need to practice with the equals PMT formula. It's just equals PMT, open bracket, put the interest rate in, comma, length of the loan, comma, purchase price, and you can solve for that final piece. So what I'm saying here is we've done the 2 questions. What are the markets telling me in terms of multiples? And then what are the financial statements telling me? I always start with the financial statements. I back into what I could pay for this business to make sure that I am safe, that I have enough coverage over my debt service, and then I corroborate that against what the market's telling me from these sources, what other people are paying for similar types of businesses. I take this information, then I go and speak to the seller and I present this evidence. I don't just lay everything down, but I've always done this research on the front end and know my stuff, so I am educated when I sit down and I explain, I can't pay more than this for the business. So what can we do about it? Let's find something that works between us. Ultimately, you can figure out what you can pay for the business based on a normal down payment, not some outsized capital injection or outsized down payment, just a standard business acquisition loan, SBA loan, with a standard down payment. You can figure out what you can actually pay. Hey, thanks for watching my video. If you would like to accelerate your journey to buying a small business and would like to join an amazing community, you know what to do. Book a discovery call with me below. This is James, the Business Buying Brit, signing off.